Hello, everyone, and welcome to the On the Map podcast. I'm David Beats, and today I spoke with Jonathan Singer with Guidpoint Security. He talked about things that you can do while you're working from home to be more secure. He also talked about ways that you can have your construction sites and buildings more secure. And then lastly, he had some really good things to say about things that you can do when you start traveling again to be more careful with your devices. So we're going to jump right into the conversation with Jonathan Singer at Guidpoint Security. Welcome, John.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on here. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what Guidpoint is and kind of what you do there?
Absolutely. So Guidpoint Security, we are an all-around enterprise security company. When you think of things like firewalls and antivirus, we are there to help you get the right equipment and to support those pieces of software and appliances. But we also help you with like security planning, strategy. We even do auditing and all kinds of testing to help you determine if the bad guys can get into your environment. We'll be the good guys to help you fix it before the bad guys actually do.
Okay. Oh, very good. Very good. Well, obviously, a lot of people are working from home now, with everything that's going on. Do you have any kind of advice for things that people need to be thinking about, working from home that maybe they're not thinking about now?
Absolutely. It's definitely a different time, but a lot of the original basics still do apply, right? When it comes to good cybersecurity, we should be doing the basics, right? Having a good, strong password that still shouldn't stop us, whether we're working from home or from an office. Other things you should consider is keeping your software up to date. As new patches come out, they fix different bugs. And those, you should be keeping an eye on those things. When your software says it needs to be updated, instead of clicking maybe tomorrow, consider doing it sooner than later. So those are just a couple of quick things that you could already be doing on your own at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, a lot of people are using Zoom now, that have never used Zoom before. And, I think that with that comes maybe some inherent risk that people never really, thought about. Do you have any examples of kind of what's going on with Zoom? Because I think I read that SpaceX recently kind of banned all use of Zoom in their headquarters.
I haven't read that particular one. It's quite possible. Zoom is getting a little bit of flack in the news right now because it's becoming quite the popular target. They've grown significantly, and even the FBI put out a warning for how to secure your Zoom sessions.
Right.
Think of it like a Zoom chat is like a telephone number. People can guess different numbers, and they can accidentally drop in or intentionally on your Zoom meeting, and that has caused quite some havoc. Imagine somebody taking over the screen share or making very loud, obnoxious noises just to disrupt. They could also stay silent and listen to maybe what your business is talking about. So there's different things to, watch out for. And it's not a lost cause. There are ways to help prevent some of this and defend against it.
And I think some of that, when we were chatting yesterday a little bit, some of that is resulting from a lot of folks that are not working right now. And so they have kind of extra time on their hands to, try to go out there and create problems.
It is. It's kind of sad that people want to take advantage of the situation, but I think it also comes that the bigger the company is and the more attention they get, the bigger of a target gets put on them by different hacking groups to disrupt or maybe take advantage of these different companies. And so Zoom has come into that spotlight just like any other large company has in the past.
Yeah. Okay. And so tell us maybe a little bit about some of the typical clients that you usually work with. Do you usually work with like really big companies or small companies, or is there a certain kind of client that you work with on a daily basis?
So when we're talking about the customers that Guidpoint gets brought into, we We cater to the people that you see on TV. You use their products every day. You visit their websites. We focus a lot on fairly large companies that are looking to build a robust, well-rounded security approach. That doesn't mean that we can't help the small and medium businesses. And we have ways of assisting them or even referring them to somebody that better fits what their needs are.
Right.
But generally, we will focus on the toughest challenges that are out there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Very good. And as far as challenges, there's, with all this COVID-19 stuff going on, there's a lot of misinformation, out there, that's being spread, from, online. Is there any kind of particular way that you can, I don't know, that you can verify information, a little bit better, just with all the kind of misinformation going around?
That is a really big problem right now, especially with all this new free time we have on our hands, especially
Right.
working from home. Social media has been kind of a way for us to stay connected with our friends and family,
Mm-hmm.
even more so than before, since we have social distancing. And that could provide all kinds of opportunity for different groups and different, maybe nation states, to feed us information that may be harmful or just not true in general. There was an example where a celebrity was recently on TV and they touted some statements that were 100% inaccurate, that were debunked entirely by the online community and even National Geographic.
Right.
And the problem that happened was that it was, some of this stuff is hopeful, right? These are the ways to stay safe, or these are the great things that are happening now that we're doing social distancing. But there's key elements of it that are fabricated. And so, one of the best ways to stay on top of these things is to use a trusted source, something like put out by National Institute of Health, or a different, or CDC. Both of those are going to be great resources. They keep their websites online, active, up to date, and any of that information is going to come directly from the source, right? These are the people that are helping design the proper mechanisms to stay safe. And that's what should be perpetuated throughout our social media, not something that's made up or intentionally deceptive.
Right. Right. And talking about other countries, I think you mentioned that there are some countries that have developed some apps that kind of help kind of track people that are maybe recovering from the coronavirus, or maybe they're in quarantine and they can't leave their house or something like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So technology is still our best friend in this case. And there are governments in other countries that are using technology to help follow what we'll call maybe herding of people, right? When you travel, or who you're meeting with and where you're going. In fact, in Taiwan, they're actively using cell phones to encourage you to stay at home and track people that have been tested positive for COVID-19. And that gives health officials the ability to stay in communication with the individual, how they're doing, but also just kind of that awareness that they're not going out, they're not interacting, and they're not causing and more spread, right? They're helping that curve and bringing it down.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as, a lot of the customers that we work with are, grocery developers and grocery anchored center developers, as well as the grocery anchors themselves. When it comes to like the physical sites of construction sites, what security vulnerabilities have you come across?
The physical sites is a whole nother aspect of it. In our industry, when we're trying to break into companies and compromise their data, just like any other attacker would do. The other way to do it is that if we can't get into the computer, we will try to physically steal it. And that's still a reality in this world.
Right.
And physical access is still going to win at the end of the day, right? You can have some of the best security features when it comes to the cyber world, but if you're not protecting your equipment and your hardware, that can still end up in growing a pair of legs, right, and walking away. And especially when it comes to buildings, having a good access card and access key systems is going to be very important.
Yeah.
Um, Even down to the type of lock you use can make a big difference. There is still the ancient art of lock picking, and an old cheap lock can easily compromise your entire business. And that also counts for those access cards, the little plastic key cards that you have that you swipe. Those can be cloned. Even from a distance, I can walk past you in a hallway or in a public space and make a copy of that access key. And so, reaching out to those vendors and making sure that you're using, a high grade, high security system is going to take you a long way when it comes to keeping it secure in the physical realm.
Yeah. Yeah. And didn't you say that a lot of the actual equipment, like the dirt moving equipment and that kind of stuff, is pretty open to security vulnerabilities?
Yeah, not to promote this, but it is possible to acquire the master keys to almost every type of loader, forklift, and any other kind of large construction or moving equipment.
Right.
Uh, it's a little known fact that they all use pretty much the same key on each brand, and there's a good reason for that. They designed it that way because people were constantly losing keys or taking them home with them. And so if there is one common key, you can have multiple copies of it and everybody can have one on the site. Now that does leave the ability to potentially steal one of these or hijack one. And my suggestion would be to have some kind of GPS tracking system on that device to prevent that. It is known by people in the lockpicking industry and by thieves that they do use the same keys though.
Interesting. Very interesting. And then you mentioned there are some ways that people can clone the electronic keys to get into buildings. Is that something where you have like some kind of mechanism in a briefcase or something like that, and it steals some kind of code in that key, or kind of how does that work?
Yeah, it's very passive. You can do it from about a foot away very easily. So just brushing up against somebody or walking past them in a public space. And those cards have an antenna. Think of it as kind of like a remote device. And so anything with an antenna will transmit and receive. And the idea is that the data in that card can easily be copied. And then you can basically make a new one. We'll call it cloning. And now suddenly, whatever access your key had, I now have that same level of access. So if I
Right.
need to get to the front door, great. If I need to get into the server room, even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. As far as we kind of mentioned the disinformation campaigns, do you see any disinformation um, like this, that are used to attack specific companies or industries? Or is it mostly just kind of misinformation designed just to kind of create just kind of chaos?
It depends on the time of year, right? We've seen misinformation and disinformation campaigns around politics. We're definitely starting to see it around health, especially with the current situation. There's also misinformation campaigns with the sole intent of just dividing people,
Right.
right? There are powers and forces out there that do not want us to get along, right? They want America divided. They want people to be in conflict and to be upset about something, right? And compromise themselves. There's also all kinds of interesting things on social media to watch out for with regards to personal information. If you've ever seen any of those fun little surveys that talk about what's your favorite color and what's your first pet and what's the first street you or lived on and all that fun little historical information about your personal life, have you
Right.
ever wondered why those questions are so intricate? They're the same questions that are used to reset your password on your banking site and on all of your other portals.
Interesting.
Oftentimes you can collect all kinds of information on people just by asking them simple questions. You can profile them. You can even help guess their password because people tend to use things that they're comfortable and familiar with when they're, determining their passwords.
Interesting. Maybe like a dog's name, or a combination of, yeah. I mean, I guess there's all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
you've
Yeah.
probably heard of, oh, what's your mother's maiden name or, things like that. But the reset passwords are trying to get a little bit more personal, and that just means that the surveys are starting to ask more personal questions. Your favorite, second grade teacher. That's Why would anybody need to know that? But equally, that information could be used to reset a password somewhere if that was the backup question that you chose.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. Um, well, as more companies are providing grocery delivery services and that type thing, um, do you see any vulnerabilities, or if I'm a grocery retailer, are there things that maybe I should be thinking about that I'm not thinking about now?
You know, it's really tough, right? This is an interesting, opportune market when it comes to stuff like e-commerce and retail grocery, right? The delivery services are touted as wonderful, right? The opportunity for somebody else to, I hate to say it, but risk their health and safety to get you what you need in this gig economy. Um, you know, at the end of the day, the third party companies are taking a lot of the risk when it comes financially and for fraud and things like that, since they are the ones accepting for the transactions. But e-commerce is still an active target. You know, um, credit card numbers being stolen from online websites, especially because a lot of businesses are now having to figure out how to move online to keep their sales and keep their business going. And
Right.
certain opportunities may arise where maybe you've skipped a step, or you're not doing it as well as you could have because you're kind of in a rush. And so making sure that you still consider cybersecurity at every part of your business is going to be critical.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to stop the credit card rings from trying to hack into different websites and try to hack different things. I mean, just as recently as the other day, I mentioned, um, Marriott even got hit. So it doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small company, you're still a target, and people are bored. People are going to want to go after different systems, especially when we're not looking or when we're busy working from home and not at the office or at the data center.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we should be a little bit more vigilant right now.
Well, and in addition to Marriott, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, I know a couple famous hacks were Best Buy and Target over the last, couple years. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit about kind of what happened in those retailers?
Absolutely. We can talk about Best Buy first, since it's the simplest. It was quite a couple years ago, but it should still, heed a warning that attackers were sitting in the parking lot in their cars, and they were able to access the wireless network of the store. It was a good enough distance away that nobody could see what they were doing, but still had a good connection. And the network that was behind the wireless wasn't set up properly or securely enough, and the attackers were able to access the cash registers over the store's wireless openly. And that brought a very quick and hastily lesson to securing Wi-Fi, and also making sure that your networks are separate, where if guests have access to one, then stores and employees should be separated. And that brings us to Target. Target was a tough story where their large HVAC machines and equipment, so big that they're driven by computers these days. Think of something like a Nest thermostat, but much more complex. And when these networks were set up, they were intentional so that the repair company could access the HVAC unit from their office remotely, not necessarily having to come on site every single time to diagnose something. And that led to an interesting compromise where the HVAC company was actually the one that got hacked, and entirely unintentional. They're an appliance company, not a computer company, so they didn't have the best security. When the credentials to the target network were found on their computers, though, that's when things kind of went a little stray, and the attackers accessed the target network using the HVAC company's information, and discovered they can do a lot more than just touch an appliance. They also could see the cash register network. So that goes into the failure of separation and segmentation.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So how can a company secure their their Wi-Fi? Is it as simple as like a certain kind of encryption or just stronger passwords or better equipment?
That's a great question, and it's actually fairly simple these days. You always want to have encryption turned on if it's going to be a secured network. And we'll start with the basics. If you're going to be providing wireless to your guests or patrons, you want to have it on an entirely separate network to begin with, right? And that goes back to that network segmentation, keeping what's company private and what's for your customers public. So with that, you want to encrypt your corporate networks at all costs, and you want to do strong encryption. You want to crank it all the way up to 11, and make sure that your devices are, speaking to each other in a language that nobody else can determine. When it comes to your guests and public Wi-Fi, it's okay to keep it open. You have to understand that Starbucks and McDonald's keep it open too, but you want to make sure that you're using the right equipment there too to help keep the individual guests isolated from each other. You don't want somebody joining the network and then basically trying to hack all of your other guests within your facility. And so
Right.
there's tools and equipment out there that can help fill that particular need to keep users separate, but still being able to access the internet when they need to.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned this when we first got started, but can you think of 5 things that you can do as a company to strengthen your cybersecurity workforce while they're working at home? I know you mentioned stronger passwords, and a couple things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take it back to the basics that we're learning more about every day, which is strong, secure passwords, and even consider using a password manager. I get it. Having some big, complex, weird characters is not going to be, easy to remember, especially if you have to have a different password, which is very important. Don't reuse passwords on
Right.
every single service, right? So you may have your email, and you may have your social media, and you have all the different things in your life. So use secure passwords and consider a password manager. It can help you generate random passwords, and it stores it in a vault with one simple to remember master password just for you. It could also be synchronized in the cloud, which is nice. So I can use it on my cell phone and on my laptop at the same time.
Are those hard to set up? Because I know we've looked at a couple different systems, and I feel like I start that process, and then all of a sudden I get kind of overwhelmed. It's like I got to download something, I got to print out this special thing that I write this password on, and then I start thinking, am I going to have to remember like every single password for everything I've ever done to get this software working? Is it hard to get something like that installed?
There's a little bit of a curve at first, which is basically getting all of your current passwords either reset and updated or imported. But luckily, the tool is very good at integrating into your web browser. What that means is when you log into different sites, it'll capture that password that you use and say, hey, do you want me to add this to your vault? And
Okay.
over time, all of your passwords will eventually be migrated or imported into that vault. And then when you visit new websites that require you to set up an account, the password manager will offer you the opportunity to randomly generate one, and then it will save it so that you don't necessarily need to remember it.
Okay.
So, and that's one of the big ones, right? After that, number 2 on my list, I would say, is the phishing emails and awareness. It's big right now, and especially we're starting to see even text messages. I'll tell you right now, the federal government and the IRS are not going to call you. They're not going to text you. These are things that that attackers are trying to take advantage of. And even when it comes to businesses, especially because we can't just walk over to somebody else's desk anymore and say, hey, did you send me this? We're a little bit more distant. And because of that, we're very reliant on our, digital communication. And so when a request comes in that says, I need to transfer some money here, or I need you to click this link because it's very important and it has to be done right now.
Right.
Take a minute, maybe pick up the phone and call that individual just to verify and validate that that's an actual request. Email is not going anywhere, and the security tips that come from it aren't necessarily viruses and stuff anymore. It's now becoming what we call social engineering, which is convincing people to do what you need them or want them to do, right, with a false sense of authority. And so these are just things to keep in mind next time you get an interesting request, don't just click all links, don't just open all attachments because it says you have to. Doesn't hurt to pick up the phone, and anyways, you might have a good conversation with that individual at the end of the day too. There is awareness and there is training and testing around that too. So there's software designed just to help employees learn and identify those things, and even click the "this is spam" button at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I got a call one time that said like, it was like a computer voice, and it said, "This is the Social Security office and there's a problem with your payment. You need to like call us immediately or check your email," or something like that. And yes, you get that stuff all the time. I mean, it's crazy how many people out there are trying to trick people all the time.
absolutely, it is. It is, and a lot of them sadly are trying to take advantage of the elderly too, because they're not maybe as well versed in some of this stuff. And it's all kinds of different tactics out there, and you just have to recognize it when it happens. And you also just want to teach your friends and family, especially if you're in the know. Make sure to share that information with your loved ones, and let them know that when these calls come in from Microsoft virus, right, that it's not real and your computer is not going to explode.
Right. Yeah.
And so, to be that trusted point of contact if something questionable happens. So that's I'd say number 2 on my list. The next one we talked about really briefly, which was Wi-Fi. I mean, it's not something we have to worry about as much right now since we're not going out. But let's just say, when things start to clean up, we're going to want to get out of the house, and we're going to want to go to, restaurants and buildings and things like that. And so public Wi-Fi still applies. And one of my, things that I always say is, if you don't speak it in public, don't transmit it in public.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I would not say my credit card number out loud. I would not say my social security number out loud. I wouldn't share my medical records out loud. And that's the same rule of thumb when it comes to public Wi-Fi, is you shouldn't transmit that information in public out loud either, because that's what public Wi-Fi is. There are components of it that are out loud in a digital sense.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And then, number 4 on my list, I'd say is, I mentioned it before too, is keep your software up to date. We keep talking about Zoom, right? And Zoom is kind of a big target right now between the Zoom bombings where people are flooding into the rooms. A doctoral student was trying to give their, graduate thesis, and they've shared their Zoom channel online for other people to join and watch, which ended up turning into almost a bit of a nightmare.
Right.
And so, update those programs. Zoom is updating. You should be updating it too. When your computer says it's due for an update, don't hesitate to run it. I understand it may take 10 or 15 minutes and you have to close all the things you're doing, but the benefits of running that update are going to outweigh significantly any of that lost productivity for 10 minutes. You can go make a coffee in that time. We know you're sitting next to the kitchen.
Right.
So those patches are essential, especially with more and more cyber attacks becoming more and more common. So, and then finally, the last one, and this just applies to, businesses considering, how do I control my work from home environment? And there's a very cool technology called DRM, or digital rights management. Think of this as how to control your devices once they leave your office. DRM suites can do everything from, block programs from being installed, right? If you're just downloading things willy-nilly from the internet, that could be a problem. It could also help prevent people from stealing corporate documents and putting them on USB drives or burning them to a CD.
Okay.
Some of the more basic uses are physical theft. So let's say an iPhone or an Android phone or even a laptop has DRM software installed on it, and it decides to grow a pair of legs and walk away. You can disable that laptop or phone remotely, right? You basically have to report it as stolen, and then all of the data on that laptop is no longer accessible. Once it connects online, it'll call home, it'll be reported stolen and essentially wiped. And so being able to keep your corporate data safe is very important, especially once it leaves your office. There's a lot of workplaces that are just not used to having their intellectual property leaving the building. And right now is a tough time where we need to figure out how to allow work to continue, but stay safe, with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so at the end of the day, of those, 5 tips, my rule of thumb is just follow what your employer says, right? Most companies have an IT team and maybe even a network and security team. And they're going to go ahead and research a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, and they're going to share those messages. So you should be getting notifications and updates about how to stay safe at home, what the company practice and expectation is from its employees, and you should abide by that. Don't try to circumvent the rules. Don't try to go to certain websites that you're not supposed to go to just because you're at home. And the last thing is that this is a work computer. You should consider everything on it sensitive, delicate, and it's not a toy. All right. What you do on your personal computers at home should stay very separate from what you do from your work equipment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's helpful. And earlier, you mentioned location services and governments using that information to track you, when we were talking about the virus. Is there anything that people should be concerned about, when they start to travel more, with business?
Yeah. So if you're traveling internationally, you should always report it to the State Department. That's one of the things that they have an entire website dedicated to letting the government know when you're traveling internationally for safety purposes.
Okay.
Right now, we're seeing a lot online and on the news about people abroad that are stuck
Right.
and having to reach out to the State Department to figure out how to charter flights home. But but on the opposite polar end of the good stuff, when you enter another country or when you're entering another telecom, they don't necessarily have to follow the same rules we do here in the United States. And your device should be considered tainted at that point. Oftentimes when you travel to other countries, we always suggest to bring what we call a burner phone or a burner laptop, which is a piece of hardware that has left and you don't know what's going on somewhere else. We do our updates over the air is what we call them. That's where the cell phone or downloads its updates from the internet, and that internet can be intercepted, and it can also be used to push out malicious stuff to your devices. So when traveling, just be very considerate about what you're taking with you, and if you have to, that anywhere you go outside that's out of our control should be considered a dangerous area when it comes to cybersecurity.
So could something be downloaded, I guess, on your laptop or your phone that, once you got back into the States, maybe it would transmit data or something? I think I heard something about that. I don't know if it was TikTok or something about somebody went to another country, they came back, and then that information from their phone, I think it was Jeff Bezos. I think some information was getting kind of shared from his phone somehow.
Absolutely. And this just falls into that whole component of, if you're using it for business, don't use it for personal,
Right.
Especially because social media and fun little apps like TikTok are considered personal, in my opinion. And yes, a lot of these apps may be tracking different things. I hate to pick on Zoom again, but they got, called out for sending all of your data on the iPhone app to Facebook, whether you had a Facebook account or not.
Right.
That's been removed, hence why you should patch. But a lot of these different trends may also fall under some of that disinformation idea, where other countries just want to collect information on us and see what they can get us to download and do. I'm all about the coolest, latest videos online and doing the dances and fun stuff like that. But
Right.
The programs that we use, we do have to be very careful with that. So yeah, leaving the country could potentially compromise devices, but also some of the things we do here at home and the apps we choose to download could potentially compromise our devices. So we have to, consider that and tread wisely and only do the necessary. Again, when it comes to your work devices.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about kind of other devices, I know we touched yesterday when we were talking, we touched briefly on 3D printers. And I think I found the story where some hospitals in Italy were using 3D printers to manufacture some pieces that would help turn scuba gear or scuba masks into ventilators or makeshift ventilators. What do you see? What are you? I think you said you have a 3D printer. What are you doing with your 3D printer, and where do you see 3D printers kind of going from here?
3D printers are so cool. I did recently pick up one for Black Friday last year, and I think it's wonderful. And so the idea is that you can print any mechanical, physical objects in 3 dimensions. And so yes, the opportunity to print plastic components for medical devices has definitely risen. What they're doing in Italy with it is great. They figured out how to make an adapter, and it's very simple to print. It doesn't take very long, and anybody can do it at home. Um, Over here in the US, the National Institute of Health actually has an entire 3D printer website. It's 3dprint.nih.gov, and they are taking submissions of mechanical drawings and mechanical engineers' work to analyze and determine whether or not these submissions are medically sound. Anything from face mask visors to allow you to use maybe like a transparency film to
Right.
cover your mask, to different types of adapters for ventilators. And it's quite incredible. I'm actually looking into what I can print. There's different types of materials, and so I don't have all of the different types of plastic that are safe for a lot of skin contact, but I'm looking to acquire some. But it is happening all over the country and all over the world. So 3D printers are uniting and making all kinds of extra PPE devices and things like that to help protect our medical force.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Well, this has been great. Definitely appreciate your time. Nicholas, do you have a question you want to ask?
Um, what makes your company different from other companies like this?
So we focus solely on cybersecurity, right? And it's just a growing space. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's going to continue to get better from here. And one of the big things that we try to tout is that we do what's called trusted advisor. Especially in my position, I love to just talk about what your business is doing, what are the different ways that you need to be securing yourself, and not necessarily what's going to be maybe the most expensive product or the product that's going to make me the most money as a referral. The key is what's going to work best for you, and building that relationship and making sure that we're doing this as a team, right? And that I fully understand what your goals are as an organization and how we can suit those needs. Because 6 months down the road, if a product fails on you or something is just generally, not what you needed and it made me a quick buck, that's going to be no good for anybody. And so we heavily focus on that relationship, that trusted advisor stance, and being a part of your team. We even have a whole managed division, right? There's one thing where I can help you acquire a firewall and set it up, but we also understand that a lot of businesses have grown a lot and grown in different directions, and maybe cybersecurity isn't one of them. And so if you need help augmenting that staff or outsourcing some of those components, we can help handle that too. We found it to be very successful in across the industry. We're in a couple of major retailers where they acknowledge, what, it's very tough right now to hire cybersecurity. I understand it is in high demand, but we need somebody to help us now, and we need somebody to help us 24/7. And we even have services around that. So
Okay.
just being there, being supportive, and understanding the goal at hand is one of those big differentiators. It's not about the quick profit. It's about the long game, and being there till the end.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I should have explained, this is my son, Nicholas. He's working on some schoolwork here. So I thought I would invite him to learn a little bit more about what you're up to. This has been great. Definitely appreciate all the information and appreciate your time today. How's the best way for people to learn more about Guidpoint Security or to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So they can visit our website, which is guidepointsecurity.com, spelled Guidepoint. And if you want to reach out to me, I am a little bit of a social media person, so I can be found on Twitter at my full name, which is Jonathan Singer, JonathanSinger. Reach out, say hello. I love to talk about cybersecurity. I also love to share my knowledge and any opportunity I get. And if there's anything that either myself or Guidepoint Security can help you out with, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll have that information in the show notes. And thanks again, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you again for listening to today's podcast. To email us your thoughts on today's conversation or suggestions for future podcasts, email us at pgrinfo@plannedgrocery.com.